When I faced my wife, Melissa, and her lover, Daniel, in court, I could barely recognize the woman sitting across from me. The same woman who once promised to stand by me through everything now sat beside the man who had destroyed our marriage, avoiding my gaze as if I were a stranger. I had spent the past 6 months preparing for this day, the divorce trial that would determine everything: the house, custody of our daughter, and the truth that had been twisted against me. Melissa claimed I'd been controlling, emotionally cold, and neglectful. Lies. Every word of it. I had been the one who cooked for her after her long shifts, who stayed up with our daughter when she was sick, who worked overtime to keep our home afloat. But none of that mattered once she met Daniel, her co-worker, her friend, the man she swore meant nothing. The courtroom was quiet except for the shuffle of papers and the low hum of the air conditioning. My lawyer, a calm, sharp woman named Rachel Myers, leaned close to me. "Are you ready?" she whispered. I nodded, though my hands trembled. The judge, a stern man with silver hair, looked over his glasses. "Mr. Parker, you're claiming marital infidelity and emotional damages as cause for divorce. Do you have evidence?" Rachel stood. "Yes, Your Honor. But before we present the evidence, I'd like to call one more witness." Melissa shifted in her seat. "Another witness? Who?" she demanded. Her lawyer leaned in, whispering urgently, but Rachel ignored them. "Your Honor," Rachel continued, "this witness testimony will clarify the events that took place on June 14th, the night my client discovered the affair." The judge nodded. "Proceed." Rachel turned toward the door. "We call Mrs. Elaine Foster to the stand." Melissa's face went pale. I noticed her lips tighten, her hands gripping the edge of the table. Daniel looked confused, whispering, "Who's that?" A moment later, a woman in her mid-40s walked in, the manager of the hotel where Melissa and Daniel had been meeting. I'd never met her, but I'd seen her name on the records Rachel had uncovered. She took the oath and sat down. "Mrs. Foster," Rachel began, "you're the manager of the Midtown Grand Hotel, correct?" "Yes." "Do you recognize either of the individuals seated at that table?" Rachel gestured toward Melissa and Daniel. "Yes," Elaine said confidently. "They were frequent guests. The woman usually booked the suite under her husband's business account." Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Melissa's lawyer stood. "Objection. This is irrelevant." "Overruled," the judge said firmly. "Continue." Rachel nodded. "Mrs. Foster, what happened on June 14th? Elaine looked at Melissa, then back at the judge. "That evening, the gentleman here arrived first. The lady came later. But about an hour in, another man, Mr. Parker, arrived at the hotel. I was at the front desk when he asked if his wife had checked in. He looked devastated. I remembered that night vividly, the dread in my chest, the receptionist's hesitation before confirming what I already feared." Elaine continued, "When I realized what was happening, I checked the cameras after Mr. Parker left. I saw the woman rush out about 10 minutes later, crying, while the man stayed behind, laughing with the bartender." A murmur spread across the courtroom. Daniel's smirk vanished. Melissa was trembling, her eyes darting toward her lawyer, silently pleading for help. Rachel then turned to the judge. "Your Honor, we also have copies of the hotel's booking records and security footage, which Mrs. Foster verified for us. The room was reserved under Mr. Parker's corporate card, the same card his wife had access to." The judge adjusted his glasses, flipping through the evidence Rachel handed him. Melissa's lawyer tried to interject, but the damage was already done. Rachel wasn't finished. "Your Honor, my client was accused of emotional neglect. But this woman used his trust, his resources, and his name to conduct an affair. The emotional distress, the humiliation, the financial betrayal, it all stems from her actions." Silence filled the room. Melissa looked shattered. Daniel, who had spent most of the hearing with a smug grin, now avoided her eyes completely. The judge leaned forward. "Mrs. Parker, do you deny this evidence?" Melissa's voice cracked. I didn't mean to hurt him," she whispered. "It just happened. I closed my eyes." Those words, the same ones she used the night I caught her, hit me like a familiar wound. "It just happened." The judge sighed, writing something down. "The court finds sufficient evidence of infidelity and misuse of marital funds." Custody of the minor child will remain with Mr. Parker. Division of assets will favor the petitioner. Case adjourned. The gavel struck, echoing like a heartbeat in the silence that followed. Rachel touched my shoulder lightly. "You did well," she said softly. I nodded, unable to speak. As I stood to leave, I caught one last glimpse of Melissa. Tears streamed down her face, her hands trembling as she reached for Daniel's arm. But he had already turned away. Outside, the cool air hit me like a wave of release. Months of anger, confusion, and heartbreak seemed to lift from my chest. I finally felt free. Rachel walked beside me. "That last witness, how did you find her?" I asked. She smiled slightly. "Let's just say people don't like being used, Mr. Parker. Mrs. Foster was more than willing to help once she learned how your wife had abused her trust." I looked up at the courthouse, the sun beginning to break through the clouds. For the first time in a long time, I felt clarity, not the kind that comes from revenge, but from truth. Melissa had taken my love for granted. But in that courtroom, when the truth stood taller than her lies, I realized something important. Sometimes you don't need to fight to win. You just need to stand still and let the truth do it for you.